Nation Roundtable at the Square Table. Joe Christopher joining you along with the Horse Racing Nation team. We've got Jared, we've got Mark, we've got Brett. And our special guests today are trainer Ron Moquett and jockey Jon Court. John, we'll start with you as far as the introductions go. 3,892 wins, 61 graded stakes, 8 grade 1 wins, multiple titles at Hoosier Park, Ellis Park, Oaklawn Park. Some of the top names of horses he's ridden: Leroy DeSanimo, Optimizer, Will Take Charge, and a host of others. We'll get into John's background and his career as we move forward here. Of course, coming off a huge weekend, John, congratulations, winning the Fleur de Lis with Frivolous, and also a race on Sunday with Honey Lake that was an allowance race, but it looked more like a stake. We'll talk about all that stuff with John. Also, trainer Ron Moquett, 516 wins in his young career, 3 graded stakes, well spaced out. Asher in 2001, 2006, Stephen Foster with Seek Gold. I think one of the craziest results in a grade 1 ever, 91-1. We'll relive that with Ron a little bit later on. And then the Southwest Stakes this year with Far Right, and Ron has the Ohio Derby contender, Far Right, going this Saturday, so we want to talk to him about his Triple Crown run and, of course, the race on Saturday as well. And Ron, let's start there because this is a good topic of discussion just for the entire panel. We were kind of talking about American Pharoah, how good he is, the fact that you finally don't have to face him on Saturday, which is obviously a good thing for you going for 500,000. But assess American Pharoah and the 3-year-old crop in general, and then let's talk a little bit about the Ohio Derby.
Well, as far as American Pharoah, I think he is deserving of all his accolades. He's classy. He's got a lot of ability. I think we're lucky to be around. You know, during this time, and I was unlucky to be in the paddock with him 3 times, and I can say that I kept looking for reasons. You know, as a horse trainer, you try to figure out, well, he's never had pressure to his outside, or he may get someone in front of him. You try to figure out ways for him to get beat, and after the Kentucky Derby, I become a fan, and then after the Preakness and the Belmont, I'm obviously a bigger fan now. So I'm glad he's not around in this race this weekend, but I'm thankful that I've got to run against him.
Now, when you are managing a 3-year-old such as Far Right, he's good. He had a really good spring, obviously, at Oaklawn. You're going to run in the Derby. You're qualified. You know, he ran a credible race there. How do you decide on Ohio Derby, and how do you try to map out the rest of your campaign to maximize his 3-year-old year?
I wanted to give him a little bit of break after the Kentucky Derby, and I was going to just kind of see where everything is. I tell my owners all the time, we've got to be liquid. Until you have the American Pharoahs or those kind of horses, you better be willing to try to hit them where they're not. And I think it's easier on our horses to try to find easier spots. So we pointed to this, and it come up a very contentious field. The extra money brought tons of suitors. So it's not as easy a race as anybody would have liked, but we're one of the reasons it's not easy. So we'll see what happens.
Now, Rod's talking about the quality of the field. You've got Whiskey Ticket in here, the lukewarm morning line favorite off the Illinois Derby win for Bob Baffert. You've got Divining Rod, who was a good third in the Preakness. You've got Ten Sendur. Guess what? Mr. Z is back again. I know we haven't seen him in a while.
War Story.
War Story's back. War Story with the blinkers on. So we're going to talk more about the Ohio.
I want to ask Ron.
No, go ahead.
You know, I think that's an interesting point that you brought up about being liquid with your owners, and obviously this is it's probably a deeper field, but probably not anything that you need to be scared of. But if it was too tough a field, how does that work with your owners, and how do you have that conversation to say, well, man, we were looking at traveling and plane tickets in this race, but it's too tough, and do you find another spot and convince them? How does that work?
First off, I'm lucky in the fact that my owners will let me do what I believe is best for the horse.
That's great.
And if I say, hey guys, this race is just too hard, it's gonna knock us out for the rest of the year, in a scenario like that, then my owners would say, hey Ron, you do what you believe is the best for the horse, and that's the reason I work for them. Mm-hmm. So, you know, that's what I would do. I'd pick up the phone and say just exactly what you said. Guys, I know we've all got dinner reservations and hotels, but I don't want to go now. And they would say, you know, they might be, you know, a little bit put out or whatever, but they know that I'm just doing what I believe is best for the horse, and I believe that they appreciate me for doing that.
Yeah, and hopefully you're telling them that, hey, this has been my recipe for success. When I see something that's a bad spot, let's try to make a change, and hopefully they'll listen to you and all that.
Yeah, and you know, at the end of the day, you know, these horses are basically, they're gifts, you know, and they're put in our possession to take care of them, and we have to do what we believe is right. And sometimes we may make all the plans in the world, and if he gets a temperature, if the track comes up weird or whatever, then we need to do what's right for our horse. And I'm surrounded by people that are like-minded. So.
That's great.
Now, John, one of the horses in the field that I just mentioned, Mr. Z,
Yeah.
you've ridden him twice, and the two times you rode him, the horse ran great. I mean, he was second in the Breeders' Futurity at Keeneland with you, and then he was third in the Smarty Jones. You had the clear lead in the stretch that day. Did you think you were home free before Far Right came to get you?
I did. I believed I was home free, and he decided something a little different with me down the stretch. So, yeah, but kudos to Ron with Far Right and Mike Smith. They just sat patiently, come up the fence, and they win the race. So, yeah, I remember that distinctively. I remember riding him in Keeneland, and I actually went over the films with myself and as well with Mr. Lucas. And he even pointed out that one of the best races that he's had seen the horse run was the one at Keeneland, and he was getting it up on the computer, and I recalled it and remembered the race very well. So if anything, yeah, it's going to be interesting. I'm looking forward to watch this race and see how Joe Bravo gets along with him.
Now, when you see a horse like Mr. Z, and you know, I mentioned, you know, kind of alluded to how many times this horse has run. Are there just some horses that can just go to battle and just keep going to battle and just keep going to battle versus some that need more time in between races? I mean, is this kind of more of an old school kind of horse? Because, you know, he's not missing many dances.
Right, he makes every dance, just like Ron was saying. He wasn't too happy to be at the premier races that run in this country, but I got to thinking, well, you had to face some tough competition, but at least you got to go to the dance, where some of us were sitting on the bench. So it's still, you get to go to the dance, but you might not be the star at the dance, but yeah, he's just seems to be like an old tough iron horse, and he hangs in there tough. And then there are those horses that they can't run every race as consistently, and they do need more time and things of that nature.
Look at who he's ran against. I mean, that's the thing. And
Yeah.
being from Oaklawn and being down there, we're not shined on as much as some of the other tracks. And I take offense whenever the guys will say, well, you know, Mr. Z hasn't run against anyone. I'm like, really? Did anybody see the race at Los Alamitos?
Yeah.
You know, y'all's
That's right.
hailing Dortmund like he's the next coming, and he's awesome. He is. But Mr. Z was a head bob away from Dortmund and firing line. And then all of a sudden they said, he can't run. He's a notch below. He's one unlucky head bob from being beaten both those two. And yet when he come back, they was like, well, there's no quality at Oaklawn. Well, Bold Conquest is grade 1 stakes placed. He's pretty nice. He flattered everyone. But Mr. Z hooked every one of them and keeps battling him. He's training very good now too.
Who scares you? I mean, looking at the race, looking at how it might set up, it looks like from, you know, a pace perspective, you're going to get enough juice up front. But I mean, who are you looking at as the main competition, do you think?
I mean, you've got names like, you know, Baffert and Lucas. You know, those guys, you recognize those names because they win races like these. So that's what scares you. I mean, we know that if the scenario sets up for us, we can win it. We have a horse that he puts on his boots every time, and he goes to work. And if it sets up for us, or we can win. We would like for there to be a nice pace and us get a clear trip and see how good we are against some of these. But I can assure you, Mr. Baffert, Mr. Lucas, and Delacour, and all the other guys, they'll be out for the lion's share of that purse too.
I see John handicapping the race. Like I think, and we talked about this before we came on. John, you're looking at this race, you're looking at horse, you're looking at past performances, but you're also looking at the rider and what they might do and how you can potentially visualize this race, not only with the talents of the racehorses, but how those jockeys fit.
Absolutely. We
Those
had that
horses.
discussion earlier
Yeah.
as you were bringing up, and that's what I mentioned. Joe Bravo's going to be on Mr. Z, so he might be the perfect match. You know, the alchemy that's the horse that I know that Ron's not going to underestimate him. Just as I said, Mr. Lucas shows up to the dance, and you know what? He's very well likely to show up, can be overlooked just because of his recent past performances. But this horse, he's got a lot of talent, and it wouldn't surprise me if he ended up being one of the stiff competitions in here as well.
John, when you ride against so many good riders every day, but when you talk about like certain riders might fit certain horses, is there something to that? I mean, we probably hear that too much, or is it that certain riders have certain riding styles that really would fit certain horses?
Yeah, it's a combination of them both. Actually, fits just the title or something that maybe you want to put to a fact. Speaking of facts, but maybe the rider knows something about the horse, therefore, and it's his secret, and the horse runs for him every time.
Mm-hmm.
I've experienced that quite a few times, and I've seen other riders, and I'll study, maybe not a race, but a certain rider with a certain horse, because there's something to that style of riding or the way he gets along, the way he understands. There's something there more than just fitting the horse. So there's definitely some elements there that really is hard to define.
That's interesting. And then as far as some riders that they like to go to the front more than others, and some riders that come off. I think that's where sometimes we hear it thrown out about how this guy's going to fit something, but it's sometimes I feel like a good rider can get on a speed horse and can send just as easily. I mean, Mike Smith is known for his big closing runs on Zenyatta and many horses, but if he is a front runner, he can get out there and do the job just as well.
Yeah, and carry the horse, knows how to
believe.
utilize that early speed, but at the same time nurture it enough to have something to finish.
Mm-hmm.
So earlier I mentioned that John his record at Churchill this meet, which is 90 starts, 15 wins, with an average win payoff of $20.37. And John's reaction was, "That's it." He thought the ROI was higher. Frivolous 32-1, John, this past Saturday, the Fleur de Lis Breeders' Cup winning. You're in for the Breeders' Cup distaff, and then again for Vicky Oliver the next day with Honey Lake. That was an allowance race, but all 7 horses in the race had run in a stake in their previous race, and you win with her at 10-1. And with both of those horses, you had them forwardly placed.
Yes.
Let's discuss, because you seem, and I mentioned this to you before we came on, you seem to be really good about forwardly placing a horse and getting the most out of them, wearing down the competition, making the lead, and holding on. I've seen you do it so many times at so many different levels. Mark talked about skills. Is that one of your secrets? Do you know these horses really well? Was it just a circumstance that both of these horses won for you this past weekend the way they did?
I was just thinking that when Mark brought that up too. I just displayed that this weekend, but it is the way things set up, and there's a bit of a secret to it. Just to get along with the horse, things have got to set up. And just like when you're training, I'm sure there's some things you know about a horse that it's going to work 90% of the time. But if things don't set up the way you think that little key that's going to open that lock and put you to the doorway of success, it's something could interfere with it.
Mm-hmm. When you ride a long shot, I mean, like Frivolous is a big price. Obviously, the horse had a lot of talent.
Right.
But does it free you up maybe more to take a little chance to try to gain an advantage over the competition versus maybe just trying to ride the race and hoping that it's the horse's day kind of, does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. In fact, you're right. You hit it right on the head. You want to free up, take that little bit of a chance, take the edge. That's going to put the elements in your favor. It's going to put the opposition at a disadvantage. And so anything, you're kind of governing out the outcome and hope that nobody gets too crazy and makes a bold move premature to where you're going to have to respond and react to it. And hopefully you'll set up to where you can call on your horse when you want to. And, you have great results. I'm sure, like with Ronnie, he'll have a horse he'd like to see it set. He knows he's got so much of a run. Then you see that Jock made that bold move from the 3/8 where he'd like to maybe see him seat at the quarter and move, because riders do get a little impatient. And I think with the riders getting impatient, you'll see that the trainers get impatient with the riders. So
It all goes together.
yeah, it does. It goes together.
I
There's
like,
some good blends come out of that. Some of them are.
I wish if you want to have fun with horse racing, there ought to be, when you pull up, you ought to get to hear the conversations.
Yeah.
Or sometimes the non-conversations.
That's awesome. Yeah.
You got some guys will come back and give you a 5-page dissertation of why he didn't do what you asked him and whatever, and then some guys will go like, wasn't our day, and then, it's funny that everybody's personality is different, and I've had Hall of Fame riders come back and give me a line of bull, and I've had, great riders that I do a lot of business with come back and say, what are you mad for? We won the second. Relax. We'll get them next time. It's that would be quite fun.
Mm-hmm.
I think we have some fan questions.
We do. Alicia wants to know, John, what was your most memorable win?
Oh, I tell you, they're all in one pool. I've got quite a few that are most memorable. Joe and I were talking about Lee Walsh the Animal, just riding him, not just winning on him, but winning on him 4 times. Wise Dan. One of my most memorables was Arch, winning the Arkansas Derby, because of the connections with the owners, the Yeaguses, and my father-in-law. So it was very touching and run very deep in my veins. So with those horses, I can reel them off. But definitely Arch was a horse I enjoyed working, developing him to the level he was able to achieve, and with the connections was very memorable. And then I win the Japan Cup for the Leathermans, for Doug O'Neill, Fleet Street Dancers. So, like I say, it's just not one. When I speak of one that was very favorable or memorable, another one comes right into play. So I just enjoy it, as so many of them.
We have another question for you too. Holly B wants to know, do you remember riding a horse named Fratman? She says he's 18 now, and she, I guess, has rescued him and is his trainer now.
I've ridden a lot of horses. Sometimes I hear
31,873.
I hear names of horses that sound really very familiar.
Yeah.
And then I've heard some horses. Oh yeah, I remember riding that horse. I look at the charts and I run against him. He impressed me. So Fratman, was it Fratman?
Fratman.
Yeah, that seems like it was a one at.
Cool
he's
name.
18 now, huh?
Mm-hmm.
He could vote.
We'll have to pull up his PPs after the show.
That's right.
Ron, just a good segue to you with memorable wins. I mean, looking back at that Stephen Foster in 2006, you were 91-1. You beat Perfect Drift that day. You beat Wiggins, one of my favorite all-time Illinois breds that day. But not only did you win the race, I mean, you look back at the chart and it said the horse rallied 12 wide in a 9-horse field.
That's the thing. It's like 12 wide with Calvin Burrell.
Yes,
Wow.
with Calvin Burrell.
Who's ever seen him without some kind of Garmin or something, or GPS out there? He's usually right on the rail, and he decides to go 12 wide. But just like John said, it frees you up. There's no pressure. So here's a horse that's been going to the front and fading, and we worked him a couple times and said, you know what? We really believe he gets stout when he comes from off the pace. Like, well, what do we got to lose? Let's try it.
Right.
And just so happened we hit pay dirt. I mean, we had some unbelievable horses in that race with Brass Hat and Perfect
Brass
Drift
Hat,
and
legend.
Cosmonaut and Wiggins, and I mean, there's you look back and you go, wow, but it was all so surreal. You didn't get a chance to enjoy it for like 3 days, and then you were like going, did we actually just do that? But that was a memorable win. The big ones they're great to me, but I like the wins whenever someone said that a horse was done and you were able to find something and make it, make him useful, and, a horse that's coming off a long layoff and you were able to get it back to the races happy and healthy. And those are the kind of wins that mean a lot to me. Taking a little cheap filly or, Amy's Deanie with us cost $3,000. We took her to the Oaks. She didn't run as well or finish as well in the Oaks, but it's a $3,000 filly we took to the biggest race you could. So that's the big stuff for me. So those are the races you like to remember, winning winning the Martha Washington or running second in fantasy or the other races, the Delaware Handicap, but you remember the fact that you overachieved with what you had and you ran better than anyone expected.
That's great, and yeah, it's got to be tremendously rewarding. And how do you go about doing that? Is it understanding unlocking the talent that might be there with the horse, or understanding what it's about? Or
I think it has to do with individually getting to look at the horses and listening to everyone. I mean, you got to be a good student to the horse, to your rider, to your jock, to your groom. You got to listen to everybody, and you make the ultimate decisions, but you take in every bit of information, and you got to have great people with you that you trust when they tell you something. If Jon comes back and tells his rider or his trainer, hey, this horse needs to wait a little bit longer before I move on him next time, hopefully that trainer's smart enough to take his 36,000 races of experience and go, hey, to get more out of my horse, I should probably listen to this, journeyman. So that's what we try to do is, take every bit of information and make a decision what we think, with the information we got.
And that goes to riding too, like we
Yeah.
talked about earlier, to
Yeah.
be successful.
Yeah.
I've told some riders before to do this and that, and it was the exact opposite of what they should do. I've said, hey, whatever you do, don't make the lead until you get to the head of stretch, and they they're 23-1 for the opening quarter, 47 and change. We're going 3 quarters. I'm going, throw all that away. Luckily you put somebody you have confidence in, and you hopefully they can make a decision.
Yeah, I like what you said. Having success, overachieving. That made me think of horses that I've ridden that would be first-time starters, going a route of ground with horses that have already got races under their belt, and a competitive race, and then you end up winning, and you really have got to contribute not only to the horse but the trainer. And you were fortunate enough to be the pilot, and that trainer had conditioned that horse to do such a feat, because it's rare for a horse to win first time out going a route with horses that have already well seasoned and experienced. So things like that, they really they're stick in your mind and you remember it. And then of course, like Ron also was elaborating on the jock basically messing up the instructions or following them to a T when everything shouldn't. I rode one for Lucas, and this horse showed speed and looked like he should be no worse than second, maybe third, because there's some tactical speed. Well, they went out there 21 and it flat and 44 and change, and here I was down the backside going, I'm last in the back of the pack. So much for these instructions. So I'm in the race thinking about I am doing just the opposite. Well, the horse made one late run. He's never showed that before he went, and when I came back, and I was like, okay, I didn't. At least we won. So, and he was like, I was so glad you didn't listen to my instructions. Thank you. And I was like, oh, that's good, because I've won races and they've been disappointed just because I did not follow instructions.
yeah, that's crazy to think. And
It happens.
Speaking
you're probably thinking like, how am I going to explain this? And is he going to be okay? And hopefully they'll come back to me, so I don't have to.
Well,
explain
when
this
the gate opens, either whether it's your plan, or both of your plans, once the gate opens, everything changes, right?
Right.
I mean,
If all of us got up right now and walked to the door, there would be 50,000 scenarios of what could happen. And how do we think that us adding some,
well, let's try it. Why not?
super trained, overbred, athletic, wild animals underneath us wouldn't be even more hard to depict? I mean, it's funny. The story about the jocks winning the race and coming back, and Calvin was riding for me at Oaklawn, and we had a horse, and there was a guy named Martin Escobar that was really known for getting him out of the gate every time he's on the lead. And I said, listen, Martin's going to want the lead here, so whatever you do, we're going 5.5 furlongs, just break and let him have it, and you be there whenever he starts backing up. His horse is going to get tired, and we got more class, so just don't tax him. And he said, okay. And the whole time, he's, how Calvin is, he's fidgeting and stuff, and he's sitting there looking off over there, asking me questions about if it's going to rain or whatever. So then they break, and the first call was Terry Wallace going, and Calvin Burrell shoots his horse to the lead. I'm going, I'm standing there the whole time right beside my client going, I thought I heard you say, I know. I told him. And anyways, he ends up winning and wins by 4. Comes back, and I'm a little bit upset more than anything that he humiliated me in front of my client. I mean, I'm happy we won. It all worked out, but at the same time, I owe him a hind end chewing.
That's
because
right.
my owner needs to respect the fact that I'm in charge.
Yeah.
He comes back and I said, "Boo boo, what would make you think that you should?" Why? And before I could even get it out, he goes like, he patted me on the shoulder, said, "Don't worry about the mule, just load the wagon." for Calvin, that's just like, let me handle it, you know. So my owner was over there giggling. It all worked out, but that's how it goes, you know.
Yeah.
The best laid plans of mice and men.
Well, that's why you've got to trust your rider.
Yeah.
But you're right about the chaos of a race and all the things that can happen. It reminds me of working in racing. People ask all the time, like, are races fixed and this and that. And one of the explanations I like to use is when people say, like, when they film Hollywood movies and, Seabiscuit and Secretariat, like, they've got to do how many takes? 30 takes, because they can never get it right. And even if you watch those at the end closely, if it's a close finish, the one in second, they're like strangling them just to get the shot with the other horse winning, because the horses don't know who's supposed to win.
Yeah. First off, anyone who thinks that everyone isn't going for the monetary gain of winning the race, nowadays, you're going to be the first one to point out somebody's percentage and ROIs, and there is no gimmies in that.
Yeah.
You can have I say percentages are the biggest joke in horse racing, because you can't get the same variables twice.
Yeah.
Why would you use them? I tell everyone automatically, if you're coming at me with this guy's win percentage, first off the claim, well then, okay, I've got some questions for you. Were they raised up, dropped down? Did they move tracks? Did they change surfaces? If we're going to throw out some random numbers and stats, let's get them all.
That's right.
But you can't. So I always tell people, we are after it to try to make money. Everyone, and if you win, great. If you run second, unless you're, Ali Sheba and Ali Dar, nobody remembers you. So we're all going after the same piece of pie.
So let's talk backgrounds a little bit. We'll start with you, John, about how you even got to where you are now from the beginning of all this. Born in Florida, began riding in Colorado, and the big bulk of the beginning of your career was spent in Louisiana, Indiana, Arkansas. Then you had your venture to California, where you became a TV star.
Yeah.
On the Jockey show.
Yeah.
And then back to Kentucky, where you've kind of, you've kind of planted your roots here now.
Yeah.
Churchill, and you're doing the circuit here again. But how did you get into racing to begin with? I read that you were around horses, but in Florida, you've got to make some moves in order to put yourself in position, and then eventually winding up in Colorado, which is a completely different part of the country.
Yeah, it's kind of all over the board. I was raised in Central Florida, and I was around horses, and at a young age, I just kept saying I wanted to be a jockey. I was exposed to it, saw racing on television, black and white back in them days. So no, I saw it, and I just pursued it, went after a childhood dream, and I'm here today. But I've been fortunate to ride some nice horses in my career. But the one of the things you guys were just covered, as you were talking about, we're all making money. We would shoot and film those TV shows and bring other horses in and shoot for hours and trying to get it right. So those were horses that were done racing, were very well broke, and we still couldn't get it right. So it was very difficult. Just to get a 10-second section, we would shoot for 3 or 4 hours, mock races. So going back to that subject.
Which was it, a movie or two that you've been on?
No, just a TV
The
reality
Jockey
show.
TV show.
I like that show.
Yeah, we had fun doing it. And we worked hard to bring a reality of that people could see what was the infrastructure of the industry behind the scenes, and we did what it took to try to bring it as real as possible.
What was it like having a camera follow you around, and then how much of that was real and how much of that was saying, hey John, why don't you play this up, why don't you say this, why don't we
it
make
was
this
reality
story
is you're making it real. It wasn't actuality. We did have several scenes that were actuality, but when you're in the jocks room and in the quarters of the jockey's locker room, so to speak, there's cameras, there's filters and booms over you, so everybody is aware than when you're coming into an environment. So we were doing things that we had to take several shoots on and shots on, or takes, or however you take it, and then sometimes we'd hit it first off. I was asked for a certain caricature to play, which fit my career where I was, and they'd ask me to do certain things, and I would kind of change it up. One of them wanted me to come back, slam the racing form down, and complain about the trainer, and I was like, no, anyone sees that every time. So I came back and slammed it down and said something about the horse. Blah, 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 damn horse. I was going to say the damn trainer, and I was like, no. And then I changed up. They did their research and said when riders get mad, they throw a helmet. I've seen many helmets get thrown. Yes, I've never thrown a helmet. It's a $350 helmet. I don't want to sling it across the room. So I decided to knock the boots on, which they use that as a signature series. Every time the show come on, you see me jump up and knock the boots down. So
That's great.
What? How much did it intrude on your day-to-day riding and your career and your focus?
Well, they were really respectful about that, but we did some off the racetrack shooting and did it at homes, and you just had to prepare because they were going to come and they were going to be there for a while, and you had to dedicate the time.
So that was about 5 years ago, or more than that?
A little over 5 years we were doing the shooting.
2009. Yep.
We also, we had to do some things, excuse me, behind the scenes, like work with the ratings and sell the show. So there's a lot more into it than I'd ever dreamed with what it takes to get TV shows to different networks.
How often do you get asked about that today?
Quite frequently.
I would think, yeah. I mean, it was very well received, I think, in the racing community. It was well done on Animal Planet, and of course, it's one of those things I think fans were like, "Oh, why wasn't it continued?" And
I think non-racing people. I mean, that was, just to kind of get behind the scenes. I think 2 seasons, right?
Mm-hmm.
2 seasons. So yeah, I mean, it was disappointing because those storylines could have kind of continued on in some way, shape, or form. Kind of like the Horse Player show,
Yeah, and it was good. I mean, what I liked about it, I mean, I think there was a lot of reality going on. It wasn't like, oh, let's just take these people and throw them in a house together. There was a reason. You guys had careers. You were trying to win races.
I would have liked to have seen that. Throw all of them in a house together.
Wouldn't have been a good outcome.
Jockey House?
Might have been interesting.
What would that rating be?
Oh, man.
So Ron, when it comes to your background, went to Oakland a lot as a kid, grew up in Arkansas, went to college. You were majoring in architectural design, but your quote says you majored in horse racing. So school and you...
No, it wasn't good. I was always lucky that school came easy to me, but I was in a situation where I had a young child and a family, and I had to get to work, and so school was something that I thought that rich kids or kids that didn't have to do what I had to do could venture out and try. I had to get a job, and luckily I was able to find horses, and I used to crawl underneath houses and do heating and air and haul hay and everything. We did everything from get beat up to haul hay to insulate ductwork on 4th of July. I mean, we did everything, but horses was my passion.
Well, time out. You can't just say get beat up without explaining what you mean by that.
Well, I mean, I did some tough man fights and stuff like that, but I mean, I got beat up for nothing before, so getting beat up wasn't a big deal. The thought of there might be money coming to you afterwards was always enticing. So I mean, it wasn't like that. It was like I was a good fighter or anything. I could hold my own. I mean, I think if I walk down the street, I'm okay. But at the same time, these guys, like we were saying earlier, you put the word professional or doing it for a living in front of that title, and there's some really good people out there that you don't want to mess with. And I felt like it was just as hard. You get beat up in horse racing a lot. I tell everyone, I guarantee you my heart rate is as much as it is in high stress workout whenever I watch a horse run. And you get beat up physically and mentally and everything. You just you're not as bruised as much on the outside when it's over. I'm still getting beat
You
up.
gotta
every
have
day.
tough skin. I mean, it's true.
Oh, exactly. You go, there's people in the Hall of Fame that got a butt whooping, 85% of their life. So that's the
Yeah.
best way I can say, and I was able to spend a little time with Mr. Jerkins, and he told me, he said, you gotta have thick skin, you gotta be consistent, you gotta want it, and you gotta be willing to get punched in the face and then come back tomorrow and smile and say, let's try it again. And that's everybody in this industry, from the owners to, God bless the owners. They go up there, and the riders and the this is a tough living, and for somebody to have the passion to push it through, they got my respect.
It's a tough game, and yeah, and how many years have you been out on your own with your own stable?
I don't know. I think it's like my 18th, maybe.
Wow.
I don't know. It's I started at Blue Ribbon Downs.
1996 at the age of 25 is the info that I got.
So whatever that is, do the math. I'm like, I remember I started. My first win was a Appaloosa named Sparkling Bull, and onward and upward from there. And the purse was a maiden special A, and it was $1,000. And I thought there'd never be another poor day. And then I was like going, who are all these people that get a percentage of this? And I didn't realize that, you mean I don't get all this? Okay.
Yeah.
But like you were saying, you're right. It's a tough game, and you got to have tremendous respect for, obviously the riders that go out there every day, for the trainers that are able to sustain and have a great career, even for owners who are able to stay in the game. And for you, now you've been training for 20 years. Obviously, the stock that you have is so much different than before. It's a different game. You've accomplished a lot, to an amazing amount, just to
yeah.
be
And
there.
you know what? I'm fortunate. I really am. We've worked hard, and we've earned our luck. There's no one give me a string of horses when I worked 4 years for a fancy white bridle stable. There's no one that said, hey, you've got a nice accent, I'm going to throw you a bunch of horses. They're going, I'm not from, I didn't grow up at the racetrack with somebody that happened to own a lot of horses. I had to come around the hard way. But that makes me where I'm okay with being early at the track every day. I don't mind outworking these guys. Mm-hmm. But the main ingredient for anyone who's successful in this game comes back to the horse. And I tell, like you ask him about riding a horse or whatever, Jon can tell you, if you want to make him an awesome, unbelievable rider, put him on awesome, unbelievable horses. He can do it. He's very capable of getting the most out of that horse. If you put him on a fast horse, he's going to get there. Same thing, hopefully, with me and my crew. You give us a barn full of far rides and gentlemen's bets and annuities and those kind, we're going to look really shiny. But occasionally we got some slow ones, So that's the thing is, give all the credit to the horses and those people that lead them into your barn.
It's both of your jobs to maximize the ability of those horses. Not only you maximizing the ability of the horse, but also campaigning them the right way and making the right moves. And for Jon, like we talked about with Frivolous and Honey Lake, you can be on the best horse, but the best horse doesn't always win. Sometimes especially for you, and I've noticed this, especially this meet since I've been here, it's like outsmarting the other riders and really knowing where to position your horse to give yourself the best opportunity to win. Is that something that you think is an innate skill, or is that something that you've definitely learned more so as the years have gone on?
I think it's something I've learned more so as the years have gone on, where there are some riders that have the gift, that have that innate skill, and they do rise to the top, and you can see that they've definitely got a gift, is what I would call it.
Yeah. Speaking of which, Aaron's riding now, your son.
Son's riding.
28, and he's a bug rider, so
Right.
it's taken him some time to get to the point where he has dedicated himself to this career.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about what it's like to have your son ride? And there are occasions where you guys are in the starting gate at the same time against one another.
I'm comfortable with it. He's comfortable with it, and I treat him as professional as any other rider. However, I will say that when he first started riding, I was very nervous with him riding, more so than any prestigious race that I had ever ridden. So that's a shout out to all the parents that their kids are doing something that's has the excitement as well as the danger element. So I was really nervous to see him ride his first, I guess, dozen races, but I'm comfortable with it now, And when I'm riding with him, I give him the same respect as I give all the riders.
Questions, you guys?
I had one just about like frivolous and on TVG they mentioned earlier that there was a speed bias at Churchill on Saturday night. Like, is that anything you're aware of? Like, do you watch the earlier races to see how
I
the
do
cars went?
take that into consideration.
That's
And
where
this
experience
is
comes in.
this is another question. It has to do with Arch that we mentioned earlier, and he had post one in the Kentucky Derby. You know, when, as handicappers, as soon as we'll see
Yes.
post one. We'll groan if it's a horse that we like. What is it like riding in a full field like that and breaking from the rail in the Kentucky Derby?
Well, I wasn't real happy with the post position, but at any point in time, with a lot of horses, you only have so many horses around you, but you do have to pay attention to the surroundings and what's happening further up links in front of you. But even though there's a lot of horses at any point in time, that one thing that I try to instill with most people that ask that question, that you only have just a few horses around with you, and that's the same with a small field or a big field. However, when you have a majority of the big field stretched out in front of you, then you've given your horse a lot more to do. So
It doesn't look like there's much room, like on the rail in the Derby.
Yeah,
it looks like
there's-
the rail's right there. You have to kind of
yeah, the
position
pressure
down
will
with
come over on you, and it can definitely work against you.
Yeah.
Broad
Tough spot.
questions?
Yeah, so kind of going back to when you said your son was starting to ride, did you teach him everything, or?
No, I taught him what I could, and he grew up riding horses, but he's ventured out to learn from other horsemen
Yeah.
and done real well.
Yeah, the reason I asked is my daughter's 6 years old, and she's like, "I want to be a jockey." It's like, oh, it's so early.
He's a likable kid, and he's very, very humble, and I've seen him around quite a bit. He asks the right questions, and he lets people that know tell him. He's got a good head on his shoulders.
Nice.
Thank you.
Ron, with we talked about far right earlier. When you and Joe was saying you've got a good 3-year-old. What's that like? I mean, are you thinking about what fits him down the road as far as later summer and the fall, and trying to see how much he develops over time without using him too much or picking spots? Like what's going through your mind with a horse like this? Are you still trying to see how good he really is?
Yeah, my job with any horse that comes into my barn is get the most out of it for that horse and for that owner. And when I look at him and I see how he gives me everything every time, and I just from that point on, I'm kind of like thinking of how cool he'll be as a 4-year-old and maybe a 5-year-old, and that's what I'd like to happen. So I run his races and train him, hoping that we run second in the Arkansas Derby behind American Pharaoh. Well, maybe next year American Pharaoh's retired and we've stepped up enough to win Oaklawn Handicap. That would be cool. It'd be all right. So,
Definitely.
So everything that I'm doing with him is just to try to develop him to see what all we can do and keep him around and happy and wanting to run.
Yeah.
So I'm going to play agent here for a minute. The last time you two teamed up in a race, do you know when it was?
No, I don't.
November 2013. So I think I'm going to play John's agent. Put him on a live one so we can cash it.
His jock agent is actually one of my favorite people at the racetrack. And the thing is like there's more to it nowadays. There's owners that have to say so, and there's agents that have to say so, and I could be sitting there with a 5-2 horse, and say if I rode Joe Johnson, and if I have a 5-2 horse, and Red Dog Gary Hartledge has a 20-1 horse, and he rides for Anita Colley that owns On Fire Baby.
Right.
Now, who do you think he's going to ride, and why is that? It's loyalties.
Right.
And like right now, if I come up to him and say, "Hey, I've got a nice filly, let's just say annuity. I want you to come ride for me at Indiana," and on the same day, Vicky Oliver has a filly run or a colt or whatever running at Churchill. Well, John was probably going to do the right thing and understand this one shot for me is not as big as the whole outfit that he could alienate for the Olivers, who he's had success for 5 or 6 years. My main rider is Santana. From that point, it's pretty much, I'll go try to find who fits the horse and whatever I can do. But like his main owner or main group would be Jinx Fires, my main rider Santana. Occasionally we do come together, and whenever we do, we've probably got a high win percentage. He rode in the Kentucky Oaks for me. So I mean, we've had I'd say I don't know, you probably got the data there, but we've had very good.
We're not talking about that. I don't think stats are that meaningful
Yeah.
either.
No, we've
I'm a
done
very
well.
creative handicapper. I don't think too much. 5 for 44 in the last
5 for
years.
44. That's
That's
what we are.
15%. That's 12-15%. That's a
What's
good.
the ROI?
I don't have that.
What was that on turf?
I don't have.
Yeah, you look
Yeah.
at all the
Yeah.
No, but I think stats are, and you go back to talking about the stats. I know Kerry McLaughlin said this to me a couple of years ago, and he said, I've always been one to never win with first-time starters. I like to take my time. But now all these stats are out there. If I don't win it with a first-time starter, I don't win with a second-time starter. People start to notice that, and then, it's every race is different. Every situation is different. You try, like as a handicapper, I try to get in your head to try to figure out what you're doing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
Well, I'm hard
how
on
well
that.
the horse fits and everything.
I'm always hard on the information gathering handicappers, and I really am, because I think the sport is better when someone has an opinion based on they like the horse.
Right.
And
Totally agree.
whenever the horse was in its heyday, it was two guys arguing with each other about a horse. And whenever someone can go up there and produce, if it was all data, that was actually where it was scientific, then I'd say it's okay. But if we're gonna use this what I call pseudo data, then why not let's just use our feelings and guts and emotions and all that other stuff that we can't put a measure on. I'd say if you believe that or say like you don't think that American Pharoah can beat Merino. Well, I like American Pharoah. I don't care what he has no data running against older horses. I like this horse. So you say you like that when we come together and we bet, and whatever the odds are is what they are.
Exactly.
So you don't have put a lot of stock in the fact that you are 17% trainer in 31 to 60 days since the last race.
No, absolutely not. And I'll tell you why.
You're not holding them back for day 61.
No,
right?
here's the reason. If gamblers want to know, here's the reason. If you look at that, look at the races I've run in the last 30 to 60 days. The Kentucky Derby, I was something 50 to 1. I was in a race against the horse that won the Breeders' Cup Classic, going 7/8 on Churchill on Derby Day, with a horse going 7/8. Now, do you think that horse is going to fare a little bit better when he goes back to an allowance race?
Yeah, just a little.
So those stats are completely misleading,
Well, they're over. Yeah, I was talking about like a 31 to 60 day layoff is how the racing form lists
Oh,
it.
yeah.
And but yeah, you're right. I mean, to your point, I mean the context is everything. Is what's the field, who's facing, what are the odds, right? Is what you're getting is what's the ROI? Well, that's based on the odds.
Exactly. Yeah, I was joking around with my son one time because he is the best numbers guy, and he's a huge fan, and I was saying, he said, "Well, do you think you can win?" I said, the last grade one we won was when we was 91 to 1. We're only 40. I don't feel very strong about it. I mean, we got to do something different, So that's the kind of stuff that I do. But I'm just, I kind of like to argue with folks. So.
Well, So, I mean, you're trying to put them in the spot where that you can win and not look too much at the numbers and all that, right?
Exactly. You let the horse tell you.
Yeah.
So we're getting close to wrapping up. I think we should definitely mention, Jon Court this past year won the Mike Venezia Award.
Thank you.
Previous winner of the George Wolf Award. How much do those awards mean to you in the grand scheme of things when it comes to winning races, being successful on the track as far as the glorified part of horse racing goes, and being voted, the recipient of these awards by your peers, by people that know how you handle your business day in and day out?
Well, I appreciate them by far more than I do actually some of my titles because of the fact of what they represent, and that even being nominated is a significant impact on me. And then the fact that I would be the recipient was very humbling and emotional, and it means a lot. You're voted on by your peers, and so apparently I'm well liked to some degree.
What kind of responsibility do you feel you have back to the game, so to speak?
Well, I believe in giving back, and I try to participate and contribute to the areas that I'm asked to. I can't do them all, but I do what I can for the permanently disabled riders, to some of the other charities, and some of the things around the communities. We visit the Children's Hospital, and we also participate in some of the events of rescue horses and things of that nature. So I believe in giving back.
What question for both of you guys before we wrap it up? What can horse racing do to take advantage of this whole Triple Crown hoopla and all the attention that the sport has gotten because of American Pharoah? What can horse racing do to capitalize on that?
Boy, that's a tough one.
I think one is give credit where credit's due, and let's face it, these guys, these owners, these trainers, these jocks, I'm on the rail. I'm watching American Pharoah train the other day, and they're coming. He's walking past us, and all these people are standing there. There's kids 9 years old, 10 years old, taking pictures and waiting till the horse walks behind them and doing a selfie, and that's the kind of stuff.
I've never done that.
That's the kind of stuff that needs to happen in this sport, and at the same time, there's a guy in the background telling them how bad Secretariat would have beat him.
Yeah.
And I'm going, you know what? These kids need to enjoy this. This is their Secretariat. Somebody was probably knocking Secretariat, telling them about Man of War or Whirl Away. The thing is let's let these kids fall in love with this horse, and the gaming. Don't pay any attention to it. It takes care of itself. You got to sell the passion of these beautiful animals doing what they're bred and love to do. And if you do that, and these people, these hardworking people who come from various backgrounds, if you put the spotlight on them, this sport will take off, because that's what we started with. The gaming and the superfectas and the rolling pick threes and all that business come later. And it takes away from what needs the attention, really, is these magnificent animals, their beautiful pedigrees, and their owners and trainers doing what they believe is right.
John, to add to that?
Yeah, I think he hit it right on the head there. I couldn't agree with him more. This is the time where the iron's hot, and we need to cater to all the elements that really bring this game to the level it needs to be.
Well, that's one of the things we're trying to do with this program is, you guys taking time out of your day. Your time is precious to come down here and join us and do these kinds of interviews to promote to the fans. I mean, we greatly appreciate it.
Oh,
So.
thanks.
Yeah.
Happy to be here.
It's good stuff, and I think talking about the social media, I think that's that's one thing that American Pharoah has that Secretariat and none of these other horses did have, and so every selfie and text and push to Facebook and all the things that are going on just makes his legend grow, and I think that's pretty cool, and I think in some ways that'll take care of itself.
Right.
Through all the digital media and the sharing and the social and
how gracious they've been.
Oh,
they've been
and
great.
how cool he
That
is.
that
Have you
is.
ever seen him more calm, sweet? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm one of the guys that went over and got a picture of him.
I got one too.
He did too. I mean, and not only is Backer and Jimmy and Georgie and everybody and the Zayats cool about that happening. I mean, this is a horse that's worth a ton of money.
Yeah.
He's got 2 security guards that they say, yeah, it's okay, come on back. I don't know if I could do that.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got to be worth millions and gajillions, and the horse's disposition is unbelievable.
Yeah, it is
You could do that to 95% of the horses back there, and they would bite your face.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Keen
And
Eyes
this-
tried to tear my arm off.
Yeah, and this an owner got bit in my barn the other day just feeding a peppermint, and I'm going, he's had more exposure, and yet you've got kids, running up there smooching him and stuff. I mean, it's awesome.
Yeah, he's got a great disposition for the champion he is.
Another parade at Santa Anita. I heard a week from Saturday they're going to do the same. I mean, you guys, when we were at Churchill just this past weekend, just the parade and him in the paddock and people lining up, to get a glimpse or get a shot. I mean, I just kind of walked back and forth in the paddock and just took it all in. I mean, it was
Unbelievable.
it was
At
a
that
real
point.
experience. So.
Yeah, if you don't get goosebumps during that kind of stuff, whenever they show him coming down the stretch, and I'll tell you, if you didn't watch the Belmont, and whether you're mad because it's not you or jealous or whatever, if there's any reason at all that you didn't have hair on the back of your neck, stand up and weep a little bit, I don't care how big and tough you are, then you need to stay way away from me as far as calling yourself a fan.
Yeah.
Because it was unbelievable.
It was a great race, and we heard that out at Churchill. It was just an amazing feeling of 30,000 people there screaming. I'm watching the big screen like he was almost there.
Yeah, cheering when he walked down the stretch and then came through the tunnel, and he paraded, and Carstangen's taking a picture with them, and the mayor of Louisville's taking a picture with them, and he just stops and poses, and
Rick Pitino and
Rick Pitino,
everybody.
yeah,
Cool stuff.
good stuff. Any final thoughts? Any final questions before we let these guys go on their way?
Appreciate you guys joining us.
Well,
Great
thank you.
discussion.
Keep doing what you guys do.
Yeah, keep
We
doing
need it. You know, this is the new wave. This is the old back of the racing form, or back of the New York Times.
Yeah, we're here talking racing. 7 days a week, and we're here downtown Louisville, kind of the hub of horse racing. So
Yeah.
we're having fun doing it.
It's great.
It's a grassroots effort. I mean, every little bit, bringing owners into the game, or doing autograph signings and talking to the people. I mean, every little bit
Take care of the
helps.
fans
There's
as
no
well.
doubt about it. So
Well,
I wish Ron the best of luck in the Ohio Derby. We wish John the best of luck at the rest of the Churchill meet and beyond.
Thank you.
Or Churchill, after this, you go to Ellis.
Yeah, I'll do some others.
Okay, cool. For the Horse Racing Nation team, we'd like to thank Ron and John, and we'll be back in just a little bit with some Derby Wars.
All right.